recorder? Okay, we are ready to roll. Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Chicago State University Gardner Institute High Impact Online Teaching Practices video series. Very excited to have Dr. Gardner Martis with us today, and she's going to share a little bit about her experience with the Gardner Institute. So Dr. Martis, before we get started, could you please introduce yourself a little bit in terms of where you teach, what you teach, and what college you teach in, and a little bit about yourself before we jump into the questions about the Gardner Institute?
Sure. I'm Gardner Martis, and I have been at CSU for 16 years now, and I teach primarily in chemistry, but also sometimes physical science. So I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences and the Chemistry, Physics, and Engineering Studies department. I myself am a physical chemist and a computational chemist, so I use computers a lot in my research. But chemistry has always been a little careful about online classes. The American Chemical Society does not allow online classes, true web-only based classes, to count toward their accreditation. So to some extent that makes sense, and that chemistry is still at its heart a very lab-focused class.
Yes.
But they have been kind of held the line even with lecture portions. So I don't teach a lot, or I haven't taught a lot online. I've taught some hybrid classes. We have an introduction to the chemistry professions that we made hybrid a few years ago. And I've taught online through our physical science to our non-majors class. And I would say that's kind of where I do the bulk of my online teaching. Exception, of course, with COVID, where we're all doing remote.
Right, absolutely. So, well, good. Delighted that you agreed to be part of this series. And so first question is, why did you participate? Why did you choose to participate in the Gardner Institute this summer?
Well, I think partly, so I had taught before COVID, the fall before, when we were back in regular. I had, I usually teach general chemistry, which is a freshman, sophomore introduction to chemistry class for people who are going to be at STEM majors.
Okay.
Then I usually teach a majors upper level class. That time it was physical chemistry. And then I usually teach one physical science, depending on whether I have grant buyout or not. So the physical science class, Science, Society, and Survival, we had recently converted to an all online course. And Andrea Van Duzer and I both kind of taught it at the same time. It had been going through a series of adjuncts, and so we needed to make sure it satisfied all the teaching objectives and the new assessments, because with the new gen ed changes. And what Andrea and I really found was that we were very frustrated with trying to convert some of our in-person teaching. We're big with, it's called POGIL, Process-Oriented Guided Inquiry Learning. It's a teaching technique that's very popular in chemistry and STEM, where you have students work in groups, and not only are they trying to learn content, but they're also trying to learn process skills, which would be like, sometimes it's oral communication, sometimes it's how to get information out of a table, how to read a graph, how to talk about your science. So those process skills are very important to us. And we thought they would translate into the physical science class. So we wrote POGIL activities for the online class, only to find out that we did not have necessarily all the skills we wanted to make an online class work well when we were asking students to work in groups. So we were a little frustrated with that class by the end of it. And so I was really looking for ideas on how to make online classes where they could still have a lot of student interaction work. And that's what I was hoping to get out of the Gardner Institute.
All right. So what were some of your big takeaways? I know we'll be getting a little bit more specific later on in the interview, but as you reflect back on that experience, what were some of the big takeaways that you took away from attending the Institute?
Well, I think one of the things that I certainly spent a lot of time reading. There was so much reading in the Gardner Institute, and so many different things. It was like kind of a fire hose of information. But one thing that I kind of focused on a lot was they talk about the how to design, was it open, I'm not going to come up with the right OEL, how to better design your classes so that they're more friendly for students with alternate, whether you want to think of it as alternate learning abilities or actual disabilities, or syllabus design and course design to make the actual, it's easier for the students to follow the material. I've been using Moodle for a lot of years, and I'm good with Moodle. I know how to use the grade book. I know how to get stuff in there. I know how to write quizzes. The nuts and bolts of Moodle are fine, but you don't always look at it from the student standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter as much when you're in the classroom with the student, and Moodle is just a repository, right?
Right.
So you're just saying, hey, I got the quiz, go do the quiz.
Mm-hmm.
It's this one, right? Because you can show it. But when you've got an all online class, or even now when we're remote, when sometimes students can come and sometimes it's a week before they can come, or they're sick or they're whatever, you have to give more thought on how to kind of take them by the hand, even though we can't take them by the hand, and show them what they need to look at.
Yes.
And so it's that sort of design that I think I was impressed with some of the ideas that different people had, if only from the how to avoid the endless scroll, and or just when to put pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I found those very very useful. And I think what I liked most and would have liked even more of would be more chance to just look at other people's courses.
Yes. Yes.
And I can say, oh, and I mean, it's not going to translate exactly, because some people are using Canvas and some people are using Moodle and some people are using Blackboard. Right. But you get one little thing and you're like, that day when we did the things, I'm like making all these notes about I could try this and I could.
Yes. Yes.
You want like a scratch. I felt like we needed a pin interest board of of course opening pages.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so it does sound like almost a paradigm shift of looking at Moodle from the student's point of view.
Yes.
When you can't be with them in the same room.
Right. Yeah, because I think it really matters more, when I've got students hopping in and out, now. So I teach remote now, not online, right? So I'm still with them for, 4 hours a week. Mm-hmm. But because they're sick or their work schedule changes or their kid, they're trying to do homeschool, sometimes they're in and out. Mm-hmm. And so I have to be more careful. Do they know what to do today? Yes. Do they know what to do tomorrow?
Okay.
In a way that when I'm seeing them, 3 times a week, I can catch that.
Right.
In a way that, and they can catch that with me too. They can ask me. They're not as comfortable emailing me, even by this point in the semester as they would be, if we were in class and they were seeing me all the time. They could stick their head in my office. Right. They wouldn't feel like they were intruding, whereas they feel like, well, I got a phone, or that seems more intrusive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I heard you say, you really would love to be able to see how other people were doing it. And thank you, because that's what you're providing with this interview today. Can you kind of preview some of the, a strategy or two that you're going to be talking about today to kind of show us how you are doing it?
So I'm going to show 2 different things. One is in Gen Chem. In general chemistry, I'm going to show how I'm using Padlet for the students to interact. Because when we do these group activities, I send them off, we're on Zoom, and I send them off to breakout rooms. And so then I've got 5 or 6 breakout rooms, and there's one of me. And I do have a learning assistant. We use learning assistants. So I've got an undergrad also bopping around. But even with 2 of us, we're not in all the rooms at once.
Right.
And so what Padlet lets me do is I've got the questions up on Padlet. I don't have all of them, like every 3rd question or every 4th question.
Could you explain what Padlet is?
Yeah, so let me, can I show?
Yes, please.
All right, so
that'd be great.
Because that would maybe be easier. So I will show. So this is my general chemistry class. This is always at the top for all of them. It's just the Zoom link, the announcements, and the office hours. And then all the different units. So every week is a unit in general chemistry. So today we were on limiting reagent problems. So they would be here. And they would see the slides that we would have up. And they would have an activity. That's the group activity. And they always know that by this point in the semester, activity means what they're going to do in the small groups. Mm-hmm. And then there's always one of these Padlets. And so when they click on that, it opens in a new window. Well, for them, for mine, here we go. Here we go. And what they would see at the very beginning is these questions along the top. And the first question is always, tell me what your group number is. That's their breakout room, so I know how to get to them.
Okay.
And the names and what their roles are in the group. And so we have roles like the reflector is the person who's going to type in the Padlet. The spokesperson is the person who calls me with questions. The screen share is because we're remote and somebody has to share the screen. So we have different roles. Encourager is the person who tries to make sure that no one gets so frustrated that they need to call me. Time manager is, I'm telling them, get to question 9 by 45 minutes. So that person's watching to make sure we're not still on question 4 when we're 20 minutes in.
Yes.
So they have different roles, and we practice the roles. That's part of the POGO process. And then they have these questions. So this is like question 1B. They've got a whole activity with lots of questions. When they get to this question, not only do they answer it as a group, but the reflector types their answer here. Mm-hmm. And that way I can see at a glance, because I've got this on my other screen, group 1 has the wrong answer. I better go, pop in. Or group 2 and 3 are out here on question 4, and the other 2 groups are over here on question 1. Either they're slow, or what's more often, somebody in group 4 knows the answers but isn't waiting for their group. So then I pop in and say, does everybody know what's going on? Are we all doing question 4?
Yeah. Yes.
And they know how to, signal to me. Sometimes it wasn't so much today, but sometimes there'll be a question in here. Call Dr. Martis to check your table, or tell Dr. Martis when you've got this question. And we often have at the end sorts of things. Kind of summary questions. What does your group think about? What do we need to practice again next time?
So these boxes under each question, you actually can see the work that the groups are doing.
In real time, right.
In real time.
Yeah, so they're typing, and as soon as they hit return, so like, if I were a group member, I would type here, and I would say, group 5, and then, 301. And I'd hit return, and I'd go ahead, and then I can see that on my screen. And actually, they can all see each other's. Oddly enough, they never look at each other's. Like this group, you can see that there's, they all came up eventually with the right answer of cheese. Uh-huh. But for a little while, one of these groups had bread. And I went back, and I'm like, how come, do you guys notice everybody else got cheese and you've got bread? And they don't tend to, it's weird. They can
They're
see
so
it.
engaged, I guess.
Yeah, but they don't tend to, or they don't trust, maybe they trust themselves too much, but they rarely will look at that.
Now, can I ask you 2 questions? Number 1, how did you get Padlet in Moodle? And number 2, how did you get it in Zoom?
Yes, so in Moodle it's easy. You click on share, and there is this embed, and you just hit copy. So you copy that, and then in Moodle, you insert a label, add a label, and in label, see this button here that is for the HTML?
Mm-hmm.
Click there, turn the HTML on, paste your label, hit return, save and return. I'm going to end up with 2 of them.
And there you are.
Put it in there. And it looks originally blank to them. I'll have to remove this or they'll freak out that there's 2 of them. So that's easy.
Mm-hmm. You made it look easy anyway.
It's not too bad. Now, I will say that Padlet, you can have 3 pages live at any given time for the free version of Padlet. And so that's enough. And that's what I used all spring. Because then I'd use 3 and the last one would fall, it would disappear. And that was no big deal because I didn't need to keep them, right? Mm-hmm. I did pay, it's $5 a month. So I have the pay version so I can keep all of my Padlets. So I don't have to remake them because I'm teaching the same class in the spring. Mm-hmm. And I can just go in and delete all of the student comments and I'll have all the questions.
Great.
So I did pay for it for just the rest of the spring semester. Yeah, you kind of decide what to do, but you can't do it just all on your own. In Zoom, all you have to do is actually, I don't even have it running in Zoom. I have it just open in my, if you go to Padlet.com, here are all of my, these aren't all of my existence, but here are all of my existing Padlets.
Hmm.
So the nice thing about paying and keeping it is if a student says to me, hey, you didn't give me, because they get points for participating.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, how come I don't have a point for ionic and covalent bonding? I can click on here and I can say, where's your name?
Got it.
Amy.
Got it.
You know, and so, you know, that makes it nice. But you could do a screenshot and delete it.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't have to pay, right? So you could just keep the thing. And the ones down here are the ones I used last spring. Or the last three or whatever that I was using in PChem. So I just have one screen of mine open like this,
Mm-hmm.
separate from the Zoom. So I keep an eye on it. And actually I use a second screen. So my second screen has this up. So as I'm talking, I have out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching the Padlet fill.
Got it. Got it.
Which seems to work okay. It's a little different than I've seen people who do other, the reflector sheets that we used to use in class. I'd give them a piece of paper and the reflector would write the answers and they turn that in at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine if I could walk around, because then I would just look over their shoulder.
Sure.
So this is just a way to look over the shoulder when I'm not able to stand, within 6 feet of them.
Yeah.
Very. And I do think I kind of like it. I don't know whether we'll go back to paper, if we're in person again next fall. We've got computers in the room we teach Gen Chem in.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like having the record. On the other hand, I would be moving around more, so we'll probably go back to paper.
Mm-hmm.
And the students tended to, it takes them a little longer to figure out. There's some things it's harder to do. If you want to draw a picture, you can draw a picture and upload it, like take a picture of your camera,
Mm-hmm.
or have a little, find something, you could include a little film. So you can add lots of things. There's a little draw button,
Mm-hmm.
and you can add, hi, and save that, and that shows up in the Padlet. So you can have different types of questions if you wanted. I've mostly stuck with typing just because I've got a number of students who are on their phones.
Right. Wow. So would you say that this almost replicates the paper version in class when you're in virtual, where you're in real groups?
I think it's really close because I can see what all the groups are doing. I can't hear until I go in there.
Yeah.
But like in class, we have cups, red, yellow, green, and blue. And so when they're in trouble, they put the red cup up so I know to come to their table.
Uh-huh. Got it.
Green. And that's, here they have to type something, help, or...
Yeah, or call you.
or they can hit they all have that Zoom button, call the instructor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, they seem less willing to use that than they were to use the red cups.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do the students like this approach, would you say?
Well, they seem to use it. They haven't complained about it. The hardest point, I think, is that some groups, the person who's the reflector, it's easier for the reflector to just start answering, or it seems to be. I seem to have more trouble with the reflector or the other thing that they just try to just answer these questions. Because they know I can't hear them, right? So if they're like, I don't know what the question for 2A is, let's just go on, we'll do 2B and 2C, right? She'll never know. And that's true, right? I will never know. It's harder in a classroom because I would hear, somebody saying, well, let's just skip that.
Yeah.
Right, you can hear that in the classroom.
But then there'd be a blank on your Padlet, right? That they didn't get to the question?
Well, they could try to skip, right? So if they, I don't have every question in the activity, and that is probably what they would like. And that's what the one feedback I would say is they often say, well, can't you just put all the questions on here?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to see the answer to every question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to do a little self-work,
Yeah.
And answer a question just because you need to answer a question, not because I know that you're answering the question.
Well, and you mentioned, the focus is not only on the content, but on the process, right? And so, you're talking about really classic cooperative learning, especially you mentioned, teaching and practicing some of these skills of reflector and timekeeper and so on. And so how do you find not only whether the students like it or not, but how are you finding this approach in terms of student outcomes?
It is hard to tell yet, right? I mean, so we do specifications grading. We don't have three exams and a final. We have a list of objectives, and each objective has a 3-question quiz, and they can take that as often as they like, but they have to get it perfect to get it checked off. And partly because General Chemistry 1 is such a foundation course that I need you to really know how to do this. It doesn't do me any good if you can solve 60% of the problems. You've got to be able to do the mole all the time, or balance an equation all the time. And so I think we are trying to figure out, and we've only been doing the specifications gradings for about, I think, 4 semesters now. So we kind of got caught in kind of separating out the COVID effect from the specifications grading effect. On the one side, we don't have to worry about a lot of exam cheating, right? Because there aren't any exams.
Right.
We don't have to worry about what do I do when I miss exams because I'm sick or whatever else, because fine.
Right there.
So take them when you want to take them, and then retake them. But without the kind of the it's a mindset shift. So without the threat of you've got an exam tomorrow, sometimes it's hard for the students to focus on I've got to do this, right? Because their other classes are calling them.
Yes.
Well, I've got an exam in anatomy, or I've got an exam in history, and so this tends to drop down the priority list until about this time in the semester. This past weekend, a lot of them did a lot of mastery practice, objective meeting. And that's good. And they tend to kind of ramble in about this time. I feel like they have to do something, which is good.
Yes.
You can't learn chemistry by listening to somebody else do chemistry.
Yes. Yes.
So they have to be engaged. They have to do it. The attendance is good. I've got between I've got 24 people in the class, and any given day I usually have about 21 of them there.
That's great. Excellent.
And even if and they do, some of them do try to show up, and I'm just going to listen today. I'm like, well, you're not going to get a lot out of that. I mean, but you gotta have you've got to have some practice here. I do wish, I think they would all be better if I could have somehow mailed them all the activities in paper form. So many of them don't have printers. And they've got the activities on Word, and they could type. They're not good at typing. And it doesn't seem real to them. Whereas writing it by hand does, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I do struggle with how much, we are slower, right? Because I know where I was a year ago in the topic, and it just takes us longer to get started. To even just figure out who's doing what role. Okay. Have to, whose computer doesn't work, or whose computer doesn't have the camera today, or who doesn't have a, once in a while I end up with, I've got 6 groups, and today I popped into group 4, and of those 5 people, none of them had a microphone that was working.
Oh.
It's really hard to do group work through the chat.
It is.
And so, that is a frustration that we're not going to solve.
So were they just had the mics off, or were they working in the chat box? How did you solve
They were
that?
trying to do the chat, yeah, because
Okay.
the two of them have computers that had no mics. One of them was someplace that was really loud,
Mm-hmm.
like it sounded like, I mean, worse than my house. And one said their child was crying too much.
Mm-hmm.
And the fifth one never answered, so I don't know what they were. I think they'd wandered off.
Yeah.
Sometimes yeah. So we talked about how to, the two don't have working microphones. I want them to, email BHelp and try to get some microphones.
Yeah.
It was just an unfortunate circumstance that somehow they all ended up in the same random, because I tend to use random groups.
Right.
I'm like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. I think, at least three of them were typing in the chat with each other.
Yeah.
So it was slower, but they at least, they didn't get as far, but they did, the questions they got.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, and you've kind of showed us how you're using Zoom, how you're using groups, how you're using Padlets. You've really showed a lot in this one example. And as you say, you really have been able to replicate the process of that cooperative learning that you're after. Sounds like a little slower, but it's also, they're getting the content. And you just also talked about things that maybe you wish could be different, or are there things that you could do differently next time that would make it better for you and your students?
Yeah, I think next time I'm going to use Padlet again because I do like it. I will probably in the first class period or two, we are going to kind of explicitly talk about, or hopefully I can figure out, that you need a microphone for the class. Get that ordered now, or tell me that I need to figure out how to help you get that.
Right.
Because we're so far in the semester now, we still don't have it. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Right.
And also, I think I'm going to, and I'm not sure how to do this. Like when we were in class, for the first half of the semester, every day I'd come in and say, here's your groups. And whoever's got a red shirt on, you're the leader. And whoever's got the blue shirt on, you're the reflector. And so I assigned, and I didn't do this time deliberately because I don't know who, because you're like, well, I want to make you the reflector. And that's the person who's like, yeah, but I've only got my phone today and I can't type, or I've got, right. So that I have to figure out a way to assign roles so that part's quicker, but do it in a way that respects the fact that they are all have some technology limitations.
Yeah.
I don't want to put them in a place where you're a reflector and they're like, I can't do that. Because that doesn't make you feel good either.
Right.
So I don't have an answer. So that's my big thing to try to figure out. Mm-hmm. And I'll probably talk to Val and Andrea about, because they both use groups too, and see if we can come up with some kind of approach that's working or not working or something.
Yeah.
Even if it's only to start every class period with a poll, tell me whether you've got a mic, whatever, and then I'll make the groups with that in mind.
Yes.
So I don't end up keep jumping. And I'm not sure if that's going to save me any time, because then it's like, well, now it's going to be slower when I'm making manual groups. So it's kind of a
the challenges of remote teaching.
5 or 6 minutes every day of grouping sort.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing I want to think about.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is to figure out how to get them more comfortable talking with each other, because we tried some icebreakers at the beginning, and I don't know how effective they were, because it does seem like, but then you never know what would be effective. The instructor bops in, of course everybody becomes silent, right? I wish I could drop in and not be seen. I don't know how, I don't have the sense that they're as comfortable with each other as they would normally be by this point in the semester, when they're in person. Mm-hmm. And I want that, just because it's more enjoyable.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. And you really highlighted some exciting things, some challenges that you're creating workarounds for. Would you have any final, in our last minute together here, any final suggestions or recommendations for faculty members who do want to get a little bit more, conversant with high impact online teaching practices? Any suggestions or recommendations for colleagues?
I don't know if I have any big overarching. I mean, we are trying to get people, but a lot of those example content that they sent us through Gardner. I think Molly started a Slack that we're downloading that too.
Yes. Yeah.
So people should feel free to look at that. I don't have any grand.
Well, even the Slack, which is an app that you learned in Gardner, right?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So that's like a big, physicists use that. I mean, so it's a big research.
Okay.
A lot of research groups use it to keep, to people talk to each other. I'm not a big lover of Slack, but I do know that a lot of my physics colleagues live in.
Live there? Well, that is a great suggestion, though, because I know all of the 30-some people that participate in Gardner are on that app and sharing resources. So that's a great suggestion.
And I think everybody would be willing to share stuff. Good. And I certainly would be willing if anybody wants to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feel free to ask.
Well, we will put the access link for how to get to Slack in the material that goes with this video. And I can't thank you enough. This has been
thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing such exciting things that are going on in your class. It really sounds like you're making a huge difference. So thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.